Hello and welcome into episode 338 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Bridget Prue, joined by Brian DeFelice and Scott McLaughlin, but we're also joined today by our guest, Pierre McGuire. And Pierre, it's so great to have you on. First of all, we just want to know what you've been up to this summer. What do you got going on?
Well, Bridget and Brian and Scott have been spending a lot of time around the rink in Bedford, Massachusetts, the Edge, owned by the Fusco brothers. I've been training a lot of players there, especially Northeastern University players. My son will be a senior at Northeastern this year. I've been spending a lot of time up in Canada, where I am right now, about 120 miles north of Montreal, where I grew up. And, trying to be a father, trying to be a husband, and enjoying a lot of time around the rink.
What's the scouting report on Northeastern? How are they looking?
You know what, Scott? They played the portal really well and really aggressively. Coach Keefe really did a good job, I thought. I think they're going to be a mature, hard-edged team. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. I think most of the coaches in Hockey East know they've done a real good job with their young recruiting, but also playing the portal aggressively well.
So you're going to be by the rink
guy, so I'm well familiar with Northeastern upsetting them in the Bean Pod every year, it seems.
It's interesting around BU because, you lost a couple players. One of those guys, that Celebrini kid's not bad. He should be pretty good out there in San Jose.
So Pierre, you're going to be around the area this winter. You're going to be, maybe we'll see you at some of the rinks, some of the games.
I hope so. I'm looking forward to that, Bridget. I mean, I don't just go to college or pro games. I go to some women's games too, so maybe I'll see you around the rinks for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I could get you as my color commentator for a broadcast.
You ask me and I'll be there.
All right. So there's been a lot that happened this offseason. The Bruins in particular had a busier offseason than in years past. They add Elias Lindholm. They add Nikita Zadorov. They trade Linus Ullmark. I guess we'll start with Bruins content before we had a little bit further around the league into some other stuff that's happened. But what were your initial thoughts when you saw those moves the Bruins made, and how do you think it affects their ceiling for next season?
Well, I thought it was really appropriate. They need a stabilizing player in the back end. I know Nikita really well. He's aggressive. He's tough. He's hard-nosed. He's overrated offensively. He's not going to give you as much offense as you think, but he's going to be a physical presence. And in that division, the Atlantic division, you need to have stopping power just because of the offensive capabilities of a team like Toronto, team like Florida, team like Tampa. Divisional play is really going to matter a lot, I think, this year, especially in the Atlantic, how tight it's going to be. Ottawa's going to be better. Buffalo's going to be better. Detroit's going to be better. So I think Zadorov addresses that. I think getting Lindholm really helps him, Bridget, because it creates better spacing down the middle. Charlie Coyle maybe isn't suited to be a 1, but he's an elite 3 and he's a good 2. It gives Matthew Poitras a little bit of an opportunity to grow into his body and into playing in the National Hockey League. So I think, there's some real good things that Bruins did there. I was hoping at the trade deadline, I'm sure Donnie tried, but there were other options I thought defensively that maybe they could have tried. I just don't think they wanted to jeopardize the future by going out and being aggressive at the trade deadline. So that's why I think they were so aggressive with free agency.
Was there a name that defensively you thought maybe they'd be looking to target?
Yeah, there was a kid that used to play at St. Sebastian's, and he went to Boston College, and then he was drafted, and he moved out to Calgary, and now he's playing in Vegas. I think you guys know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, they were linked to Noah Hannafin for a long time, and I think even after the trade, there was, maybe if he gets to free agency, they'll go after him, but obviously he didn't get there. So, right. Pierre, it's interesting because, Don Sweeney will say that they didn't necessarily target size, but it looks like they did. They got much bigger. They definitely got more physical, and it's interesting because obviously we know the NHL has gotten so much more skilled whether you go back 10, 20 years, whatever time frame you want to use. But now it seems like there's almost this renewed emphasis on big and strong and physical. And I'm wondering, in your eyes, is that just a reaction to the Florida Panthers and the success that they've had? Or do you kind of see this starting even before then, where teams are starting to kind of value those aspects again, especially for playoff hockey?
I think if you go back to 2018, Scott, and you look at the development of the Washington Capitals and them winning, You look at the next year, 2019, St. Louis going on the road and winning a Game 7 in Boston. And then you look at all the teams, Tampa Bay and how big they were, going to the Stanley Cup final 3 straight years, winning 2 out of 3. You look at the size of Colorado, especially with their dominant players like Cale Makar and obviously Nathan McKinnon and Gabriel Landeskog. And then I think you look at what Vegas did, 2 years ago, and then you look at last year, Florida Panthers. I think size is back. I think nasty is back. I think the NHL is changing. I think people are really being very careful about how they're evaluating players. I think eye test is becoming way more valuable than a lot of people want to admit. And I know there's been a heavy sway on analytics, but a lot of times analytic players are smaller players and they're faster players. It doesn't mean they're meaner players. So I think there's a lot going on right now in the league, and it's going to be very interesting to watch this year. Really interesting to watch this year, Scott, to see whose ideology is right. Because I think there's a more of a lean towards big, nasty, and fast rather than small, skillful, and quick. And we'll see which one works.
Well, that's music to Bruins fans' ear for sure. And Pierre, joining Trent Frederick, Charlie McAvoy, Justin Brazeau, Carlo Lindholm. The Bruins already have size, but there's a bit of a nastiness that they really acquired this offseason. So it might be as big and bad as the Bruins can get in 2024. What can you tell fans about Max Jones and Mark Kostelic, who we know about them, you know more about them, but fans might not know about them until October?
Well, I worked with Mark when I was senior vice president in Ottawa, Mark Kostelic, and he's a tremendous person. He is all character all the time. He's one of the most coachable kids you'll ever meet. I watched him play in the American Hockey League. I traveled around with their team in the American League, watched him play his first NHL games in Ottawa. Character personified, a kid that played in the Western Hockey League with the Calgary Hitmen. He's a really good depth player. He'll fight anybody in the league. He'll finish every check. He'll block every shot he has the potential to block. He's fearless and he's selfless. He's a tremendous person. I can't say enough good things about him. He reminds me of a prototypical Bruins depth player. In terms of Max Jones, big, super fast, limited skill-wise. If they can squeeze a little bit more nasty out of him, that would be really good news for the Bruins in terms of depth. And Zadorov is just, I call him Ivan Drago, and he really is like that. He's big. He's super strong. He's very nasty. The biggest thing with him, and I don't want to scare Bruins fans, is he's got to be receptive to coaching. He's moved around a lot. And when you're a player that big and that fast and that tough, the question starts to be, why have you moved around so much? Those are hard guys to find. And I know a lot of the guys that have worked with him over time, they like him a lot as a person. They just hope he can be more receptive to coaching. And if he can, he's going to be a very good player for the Bruins. But that's the key for him, receptive to coaching.
Well, is there an area in particular that you think he needs to improve on to stick somewhere?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is making better decisions without the puck. Don't be that guy that's trying to lean in the neutral zone and go for the elimination hit where you can back off, give a little bit more room. And when you're 6'6" and 6'7", like he is, can play a contained game. You don't always have to kill people on every shift. And, if I were the Bruins, one of the things, and I'm sure they've thought of this, Donnie's a really smart guy, by the way. He's not just smart in school. Donnie was a really smart kid. Donnie was a really smart player. I've known Donnie a long time. He's a really smart player and a smart hockey man. I'd be showing him tapes of Zdeno Chara. This was Chara with the Islanders. This was Chara with Ottawa. This was Chara as a captain in Boston. I'd showed Zadorov all that development over 10 years and say, look what he became. You could do that. That's what I'd be doing.
Yeah, and Zadorov has said Zdeno Chara is one of his idols. So you would think he'd be very receptive to that. And Pierre, it's interesting that you mentioned, him being receptive to coaching. And obviously we hear all the time, one of the strengths of Jim Montgomery is how he communicates with players and the relationships he's able to form and build with his players. So that's obviously going to be, one test for him is getting the most out of Zadorov. what do you think of Jim Montgomery, and what does he have to do this season? What would be a successful season for Jim Montgomery this year?
So I got to give you total transparency. When Jimmy was a player with the Pembroke Lumber Kings in the Central Ontario Hockey League, I was coaching at St. Lawrence. I tried to recruit him. I knew his late father really well in Montreal. I'm a huge Jimmy Montgomery fan. When I was coaching at St. Lawrence, I told you I tried to recruit him. I also coached against him, and he was at Maine. So I've known Jimmy a long time. I'm a huge fan. Think the world of him, respect him a lot. You know, he's had some personal issues that he's had to deal with over time, and I think he faced up to them and dealt with them really well. I think he's been a really good coach for the Bruins. To me, the biggest thing is take a step forward. Don't just have success in the regular season. Build on that success in the regular season and take it forward in the playoffs. Don't be a first or second round piece of fodder. Get past the second round. Get into the Eastern Conference Final. I think anything less than getting past the second round, I think, would be disappointing.
Yeah, I agree. I think the bar should be conference finals for the Bruins. Obviously, 2 teams will get there, but more than 2 teams should have that bar for themselves. Pierre, I want to ask you about Charlie McAvoy, because we here think that Zadorov joining Boston can help free McAvoy up just a little bit more than maybe he has in recent years. And it seems like everybody's asking, does he have that next level offensively? Because he has everything else, right? And a good place to improve offensively for him is the power play. Do you think he has, not Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, but do you think he has another notch offensively to hit as an overall player and defenseman?
Yes, I do. I go back, and Scott will appreciate this. I go back to when he, Matty Grzelcyk were running the power play at Boston University. You know, I remember Charlie playing in the World Junior, you know, with Adam Fox and Ryan Lindgren. So, I mean, I got big reference points on Charlie and how good he can be. I think that's the part of his game, Brian, that really needs to be refined, the offensive part. The defense is there, but he doesn't need to push it so that he puts himself out of position. You know, I coached a really good player when I was a young coach in the league. His name is Larry Murphy. He's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Larry was not as good defensively as Charlie, but man, oh man, was Larry good offensively. And Larry wasn't the fastest skater. Charlie's a much better skater than Larry ever was. They're both right-hand shots. Charlie's got to learn. And I'd be watching a player like Larry Murphy. I'd be watching a player like Adam Fox if I were Charlie McAvoy, to try to be like those guys offensively. It's not always high risk. It's making simple, smart plays. The other thing, and I know he was a left-hand shot, but this is for Bruins faithful in particular, Brian. When I was coaching the league in that small building in Boston, we played the Bruins 2 years in a row in the Eastern Conference Final. Raymond Bourque was at the top of his game. Raymond Bourque was so good, it was ridiculous. And most of our game plan, and I presented it to our team, was to eliminate Raymond Bourque. And I will tell you right now, I know Raymond was a lefty and Charlie's a righty. Raymond was as good as there was in the NHL at that time, and there were a lot of good defensemen offensively. Paul Coffey was in the league. Nick Lidstrom was in the league. Like, you go look at all the good offensive defensemen. Robbie Blake was in the league. There were a lot of really good. Raymond was as good as there was. Charlie McAvoy needs to watch a ton of Raymond Bourque. He's never going to be as good as Raymond, but watch the characteristics, especially in the smaller building. I can't, if I'm a Bruins fan, I want Charlie McAvoy to be the right-handed poor man's version of Raymond Bourque. And if he could do that, it'd be huge.
I feel like what Ray did so well, and it's a very underrated part of the game, and it's also very difficult, and the great players make it look easy, but it's the ability to get shots through from the point, especially with an ever speeding up game. And I just think that because when you watch Bourque, obviously he was phenomenal, but it seemed like it was the little things like getting shots through that just add up and create chaos and opportunity in the net front. Yeah,
well, Cam Neely's in the Hall of Fame, and a big reason why is he was in net front presence with Raymond Bourque getting pucks to the net, and Adam Oates making unbelievably slick plays from the wing as a right-hand shot. But no, I agree with you, Brian. I think it's a great point. But that's why I think it's so important that Charlie pay attention to somebody like Raymond. I had Raymond on our podcast, Bridget, Scott, and Brian, earlier this year. I worked with Jimmy Murphy on a podcast called The Eye Test. And Raymond was so great, and he was really pumping the virtue of and the athleticism of Charlie McAvoy. And I was like, Raymond, I drew up a lot of game plans to try to shut you down. I know what we did. I just have so much respect for Raymond. And I hope that somebody in the Bruins organization will, especially Donnie knows, he played with Raymond, just point out how great Raymond was, and Charlie could learn a lot from him.
Yeah, and Ray's still around. I mean, he could be a resource firsthand there if McAvoy wanted to talk to him at some point. But it's all really good insight here. So thank you for helping us out with that one. I have another question too, because another one of the major talking points after free agency settled, the Bruins are what they are at this point. They lose Jake DeBrusk. They seem to have a little bit of a gap in their top six. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on either just how you feel about their top six and how it might compare to other teams, especially in the division and in the conference, and what could they do to try to, like, is it concerning to you that they start out the year without they're about a winger short, or is it fine? We'll get it at the deadline. No need to really worry until you get to that point in the season.
I think one of the things that's going to be really important, Bridget, I love your question because I think it's got a lot of merit. One of the things that's going to be really important, we were talking about slotting before with the center ice play. If Elias Lindholm can get back to the offensive level he had when he played with Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk in Calgary, that's going to alleviate a lot of losing Jake DeBrusk. Because one of the things, I scouted them so much because when I was in Ottawa, we had interest in a lot of those Calgary players that had the potential to be free agents. And we also owned Matthew Tkachuk's brother, Brady. So we were looking at a lot of different things at the time. And Elias was so good. That was the best line in the NHL. It wasn't even close. They were by far. Gaudreau, Lindholm, and Tkachuk was the best line in the NHL. And if he can get back to that level, being an 86 to 105 point player, if he can get there, that alleviates whatever issues you have replacing Jake DeBrusk. That takes it away. It does. It really does. So the pressure is going to be on him. And Charlie Coyle is better suited to be, I think, a 2 or a 3, probably a 3. Poitras has to stay healthy. And Pavel Zacha, he's going to have to be way more consistent. He can't be here one night and down here the next. He's got to be a solid B+ every night. And if he can, I think the Jake DeBrusk stuff goes away. I really do. But it all starts with Elias Lindholm.
If you guys, do you guys have any other questions about like the present? Because I was gonna shift. I was gonna pull back and go a little bigger picture.
I guess just one, Scott, because Bridget brought it up, and I also have some questions, Pierre, for you as well regarding your career. But Bridget mentions it, and I guess the name everybody's talking about here internally would be Fabian Lysell. And I know none of us have a ton to go off of, but what's your gut telling you on the player? Do you think he's ultimately an NHL player, but maybe not what everybody hopes, or is he going to have a tough time, do you think, finding a home long term in the National Hockey League?
He's got huge NHL upside. He's got major NHL skill. He's got unbelievable escapability with the puck. He's one of the few young players I've seen that's a little undersized that can still break away from back check pressure when he has the puck on his stick. So he's one of those guys that gets faster when he has a puck on his stick. A lot of guys get slower. He gets quicker. I still think there's something there to work with, Brian. I really do. I saw him a lot his draft year. I saw him a lot with Sweden in the summertime at USA Hockey when they played USA, Finland, and Sweden. So I saw him a lot. I like him. I wish he was a little bigger. But I find that he could be a valuable component to a team. It's just him. Remember there was a player that played in New Jersey, Sergei Brylin. Do you remember that name? Sergei Brylin was an undersized guy, but he was super hockey strong, really hockey strong. Fabian Lysell's got to get hockey strong like Sergei Brylin. He's a more talented player than Brylin, but he's not hockey strong like Brylin. He's going to have to get that. He's going to have to get that hockey strong. And if he can get that as an undersized guy, then he can be a valuable player in the league.
Yeah, and I had one more present-day question before we get to yours, Scott. Sure. And it just because goaltending has also been such a big storyline here in Boston for the last few seasons with the goalie tandem, and now the goalie tandem is broken up. And, what did you think when you saw Ullmark head to Ottawa And did either team win the deal in your mind, or was it just, was it pretty even to you?
I think Ottawa had to move on from Joonas Korpisalo. I was not there when Korpisalo was brought in. It was presented when I was there, and I rejected it outright. I thought he was overpaid when Ottawa signed him, and I don't think he's a number one guy. I think he's getting paid a lot to be a number two guy. I don't think he's a better goalie than Jeremy Swayman, and I don't think he's a better goalie than Linus Ullmark. Linus is going to have to go to Ottawa's a hard hockey market. They haven't had playoffs in 8 years now, and there's high expectation there. I can tell you that right now. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, Bridget. But I would say if they can get Swayman signed, obviously at a digestible number, and he plays as well as I think most people expect him to, and I expect Jeremy to be really good, then Korpisalo won't really matter. The Bruins are good enough defensively where they'll insulate him. But Swayman's a huge story for Boston, huge story. And in terms of Ottawa with Ullmark, I think good. What people don't know about Ottawa is they've got some young guys. Levi Merilainen is a really good Finnish goalie. He played in the American Hockey League last year. And they have another kid, Mads Solgaard, who's a really good kid out of Denmark. So they've got some younger guys coming along in goal that are pretty good that will eventually insulate Linus Ullmark.
All right, Pierre, I want to ask, obviously, you were front and center on national TV coverage for a long time. You talked about some Bruins you coached against, specifically Ray Borg. I'm wondering, who is your favorite Bruin to cover, whether that's because they were just so entertaining to watch or great to talk to, get information from, whatever, combination of the two? Who are maybe a couple of your favorites?
Well, Mark Recchi, I loved Rex. I'll tell you a good story about Rex when we get through this, and then Brad Marchand. The first time I met Brad was 2007. The Super Series was being played, Canada versus Russia. It was in the summertime. I think we spent 21 days in Russia and 12 days as a group in Canada. It was an 8-game series. Brad was phenomenal. It was my first real time spending a lot of time with him. And we developed a tremendous friendship. I have a lot of respect for him. I think he's a tremendous player, obviously, and his career has been phenomenal. So I'm a big fan, and he's always been really great with information. Mark Recchi, I had the privilege of working with and coaching in Pittsburgh. We won a Stanley Cup together. I was fortunate to be there for 2. We traded him away before he won our second one. But I got a great Recchi story for you. We were in Vancouver. I was working for NBC. With Doc Emmerich and with Eddie Olchuk, and we were doing Game 7, obviously, in Vancouver in 2011. And we were at the Pan Pacific Hotel, and I was actually hired in that hotel in 1990 by the Pittsburgh Penguins. So I had a lot of good memories from that hotel, and Mark came up. We had a private room NBC had set up, and we were just sitting there the night before a game. He was going out for dinner with the team. We had a couple glasses of red wine, and I said, "How do you feel?" He goes, "Never felt better." And I said, "Really?" I said, "You're going to win a Game 7?" He goes, "We're not just going to win. We're going to win going away." I go, "Why do you say that so comfortably?" He said, "Our depth players are better than their depth players, and you'll see tomorrow." So if you remember, and it was appropriate that we were drinking a glass of red. They had the Merlot line. So, it was Gregory Campbell, and it was Sean Thornton, it was Danny Paille. And Mark nailed it. If you go watch that Game 7 tape, those guys dominated.
Yeah.
Like, the elite players were good, but the role players were better than good. And so Mark and I have always had an unbelievable relationship, and that's one that I will always remember. That night, well, it was actually that afternoon at the Pan Pacific Hotel. He nailed that Game 7. He nailed it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it's funny how momentum can shift in a series. I think Sean Thornton went in for Tyler Seguin. If it wasn't Game 1, it was shortly thereafterwards in that series, and the rest is history. And obviously, Seguin had a great impact in the Tampa series. But it's just those character depth players; they do come through in those moments.
Well, remember the hit? It was Aaron Rome on Nathan Horton, and that really said, "Okay, we're done with this. We're bringing in the artillery." And so they took the slick guys out and they put the mean guys in, and obviously Sean was one of them. And it wasn't just what he did in the game, it's what he did in the pregame skates. I was down there, and he found a way of just skating right by the center ice line and letting guys know this is what's going to happen in this game, and I'm the guy that's going to do it to you. He was great, and obviously Big Z was phenomenal on that in that entire series.
Well, and just the depth it took to overcome losing Horton too. Like, think of how huge he was that whole postseason, scoring some of the biggest goals, whether it's Game 7 Montreal, Game 7 Tampa.
Yeah,
like just to be able to overcome that loss, it's because playoffs are such a war of attrition every year. Like, every team's gonna have some big injury at some point, and being able to overcome that and for them to do it in the Cup final, it required a lot of guys stepping up.
Yeah, that Timmy Thomas wasn't bad either. In all my years, I have to tell you, Timmy went to the University of Vermont. He was drafted by Quebec. I actually coached against him in East Coast Hockey League when he was playing in Birmingham, Alabama, before he went over to Finland. And, it's interesting. I've seen a lot of good goalies. I tried to recruit Marty Brodeur when he was 16 years old from Montreal to come play for us at St. Lawrence. And I've never seen a goalie play the position like Timmy Thomas did. He reminded me of a middle linebacker playing for the Dallas Cowboys or the New England Patriots. He played the position like a linebacker. He was so aggressive. He was so fearless. He was so nasty. And his teammates completely trusted him. It was amazing. It really was amazing to watch him that entire playoff season.
So you're saying he was like the goal was like the quarterback, and he wasn't letting anyone sack the quarterback.
Pretty much, Bridget, that's right. That's exactly right.
That's a good metaphor for it, because it wasn't always pretty.
No,
but he got it done.
Yeah.
Pierre, we had a question from a listener. We had mentioned on our last podcast that we were going to have you on, and listener Joe emailed us and said he wanted us to ask you, in your opinion, who are the greatest play-by-play voices in hockey, either present day or all time?
Well, when I was a kid growing up in Montreal, Danny Gallivan, to me, was the gold standard. He was so good. And he and Dick Irvin did the games together for so many years. Back then, they didn't have hockey games on every night, but the radio worked every night. And I could listen to Danny and Dick on a radio. And I remember my mom would come in my brother and I shared a room. And I remember my mom would come in and she'd get all upset because we'd have the transistor radio underneath our pillows listening to the Canadiens games. And I would listen to Danny forever and ever. And then obviously I had the privilege of coaching in the NHL, and, being interviewed by Danny was amazing. And obviously one of my great partners, Doc Emmerich, I was a partner at Doc's for 16 years. Just phenomenal. One of the biggest games I ever had the privilege of working was the 2010 gold medal game between Canada and the U.S. in Vancouver. Both on the men and the women's side, believe it or not. And my partner for those games was the great Doc Emmerich. And we did, 16 Stanley Cup finals. I think we did 5 Olympic gold medal games, both on the men and the women's side. So Doc would be right up there. Chris Cuthbert would be right up there from Canada. Phenomenal talent. So there are a lot. But one thing I can tell all of you, when I was an assistant coach in the league in particular, you used to break down tape, and you always keep the home play-by-play voice on because they disseminate a lot of good information. And we didn't have computers back then. We did 2 VCR boxes, and you do reel-to-reel tapes. So I listened to a lot of different guys. One of the guys, and I know some people love to hate him, but I'll tell you who was really good, and I listen to him all the time. Jack Edwards was real good. If you weren't part of the Boston Bruins, I could see why you'd not like Jack. But if you're part of the Bruins, man, you love that guy. So Jack was really good. And so there were a lot. There were a lot of really good ones. But to me, Danny Galvin, Chris Cuthbert, Gordon Miller in Canada, Foster Hewitt. Right now, one of the really best guys currently is John Shorthouse in Vancouver. He's really, really good. Jack was really good. And obviously the great Doc Emmerich. Doc, phenomenal. Just phenomenal.
Yeah, Doc was the best.
I wanted to ask you about Jack because you personally knew Jack,
Yep.
And you know Judd as well. So what are your thoughts on the transition that we're about to see in Boston, in the Bruins media?
What an awesome opportunity for Judd. Now, Judd knows how to call Stanley Cup winning games, as he obviously was Chicago in 10, 13, and 15. So I think that's kind of cool too. So you got somebody that's got Stanley Cup winning pedigree, which I think is phenomenal. I got to know Judd really well because I did all those Chicago Stanley Cup playoff series with Doc Emmerich and Eddie Olczyk. So I saw Judd a lot. I always was a fan of his work. One of his longtime partners on the radio played for me in Ottawa, so I know him really well, Jed, that is, and I think he'll do a really good job in Boston. I think he'll do an outstanding job. And you know what? He should be excited. Not every day you get to be the play-by-play guy for an original six team. That's a heck of an accomplishment.
It definitely is.
Yeah, and he obviously, I think it's going to be such a smooth transition being with the team already and knowing the job. And it's funny because him and I have talked before about because he obviously mostly did radio and I've been on TV for the last 6 years, and he was giving me some pointers on how I should be prepping for my play-by-play, and like he is just so on top of everything and players, and I think it's gonna be a good, nice, easy, smooth transition to Judd.
Well, the guy that's sitting up there next to him, that Andy Brickley guy, he's good too. He's fun. I like Andy a lot. I've known Andy a long time, going back to when he was a player at University of New Hampshire. So, yeah, no, I think it'll be really good. Bruins fans, you'll miss Jack, but Judd will step in and do a good job. And Brick always does a good job, really good job.
Pierre, pulling back to maybe the national scene, obviously, you guys at NBC were front and center for a long time. You had NHL rights. Now it's ESPN and TNT. What are your thoughts on kind of the state of the NHL on national TV these last couple of years?
Well, it's different for sure, because when NBC had it, Scott, it was one-stop shopping. You knew exactly where to go. You were either going to NBC Sports Network or you were going to the big NBC. The cross promotion was phenomenal at NBC because you had Sunday Night Football, you had the Olympics, you had a lot of golf, you had some majors in tennis, and you had a lot of Notre Dame football. So really high watched, high visible products that could lead to amazing cross promotion. You might have it with ESPN and you might have it a little bit with Turner, but I don't think you have it as much. They've worked both. I think both groups have worked hard to make it tremendous. It's still a work in progress. I think it took a while at NBC too. We had it for 16 years, so we weren't running marathons right out of the gate. It took a little while to build up. So I think they're working on building up their brands.
Pierre, I think that the job you had for your time between the glass is one of the coolest, most unique, I think, in all professional sports. And I could probably, kick Bridget and Scott out of this chat and just ask you questions for hours, but I'm not going to do that. So I'll just ask you this. Is there one moment, this is a very difficult question on the spot, but is there one particular moment or series where you were watching it and you were like, this is truly special? Like every day here is great, but this is like a special series, game, or moment that you knew in real time was just different.
Yeah, you know what? I have a bunch of different answers, but I'm going to give you one that really resonated with me. Detroit and Chicago were playing in the playoffs, and the tape doesn't lie. You can go look at it. Jonathan Taves, who was one of the most composed players in the NHL when he played, a phenomenal leader, he had a meltdown. He took a penalty in Detroit, and he had a meltdown. It was scary, and we had to go to commercial. And I remember Joel Quenneville, who is really unflappable on the bench, and he was getting mad because Taves was getting mad. And I watched a kid that I've known for a long time who, I'll tell you who it was. It was Seabrook, Brent Seabrook. Go up and down the Chicago bench, said, boys, I got this, but we all got to calm down. And he was looking right at the coaches. You would never have gotten that unless you were inside the glass. And Brian, he went right over. I've never seen a player do this. He went right over to where Taves was in Joe Louis Arena in the visitors' penalty box. He opened the door, and during the TV timeout, he sat down next to him, and he basically put his arm around him. And he said, just calm down. I wasn't there, but you could see he was just trying to decompress the situation. eventually, Chicago went on to win the series, and they won the cup that year. But that was a defining moment of that chase for the cup. Unless you had somebody in between the benches, you never would have known that. You would have never known, because it was during a TV timeout, and we came back and reported it as a group, our broadcast team, and it made a huge difference in the series. So that's one of the reasons why that position's valuable if it's utilized properly.
I used to be so jealous. I always said this is the best seat in the house. Like, Pierre's got the best seat. No one else, like, very few people are able to experience a hockey game from that point of view. Obviously, most of the time when we're in the stands, we're up pretty high. Like, occasionally you get nice glass seats and it's awesome. I'm obviously normally dead center up, broadcast booth. So I get the same view all the time, but I've never got a chance to do between the glass. And I've always wanted to, because it just seems like such a unique yet scary place to be, because pucks are coming, elbows are coming. Did you ever take an elbow or anything like that when having duck?
No, sure. I've been hit by pucks. I've been hit by elbows. I've been hit by fists. The worst one ever was I get hit over the head in Buffalo in a playoff series between the Rangers and the Sabres. And both players actually, after the first period, came and apologized. But what happened was there was a collision right in front of me, and I was actually looking at my replay monitor, and one of the guys, their stick came down and cut me right over the top of the head, and I was bleeding pretty bad. And the legendary trainer in Buffalo, Rip Simonik, he looked at me and he goes, "Petey, you're bleeding bad, man." I said, "No kidding, thanks for the news flash." So he says, "You better take a towel." So I took the towel, he gave me a towel. He says, "You better go get stitched." I said, "I can't. It's just me and the guy upstairs." It was Gord Miller from TSN. So I went on the talk back and I said, "Boys, you can't put me on the screen until after the period. I got to go get stitched up after the period." So I finished the period and I went into the Buffalo Sabres dressing room. The guys were all getting a good chuckle out of it because I was bleeding pretty bad. And they didn't stitch me up. The surgeon comes up to me and he goes, "I just came back from the battlefields in the Middle East." I'm like, "Wow, that's serious. It's nothing compared to hockey." And he goes, "There's a new thing they do to close up the wounds in the battlefield. I'm going to use it on you." So he took a needle and he just shot surgical glue right up into my forehead, and it closed. The bleeding stopped, Bridget, I'm not kidding you, instantaneously. Like, it was unbelievable. And he says, "You'll see in about a week, the glue will start to pop out and just pick it off like it's a scab."
Oh my God.
And that's what they did. And it closed the wound up that quickly. And it was a pretty substantial wound. But yeah, that was one that I remember pretty graphically. And I see Rip Simonik from time to time. He goes, "Hey, that wound healed up pretty good, didn't it, kid?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, it healed up really good."
Oh my God.
You can tell that must have been a while ago if the Sabres were in the playoffs.
That's right, Scotty. That's right, Scotty. You're good. Spot on.
Yeah, that's scary. That's scary.
Actually, I can tell you who the players were too. It was the late Karl Rakunik, who died in the plane crash in Russia, and Alice Kotelik. Those were the two that collided right in front of me. And neither one of them knew if it was their stick or not, but both of them, to their credit, both of them came up and apologized. I said, "You guys don't owe me any apology. I choose to be here. Like, thank you so much. I'm in your workplace. You don't have to apologize to me." It was really cool how they did it. It was really cool.
Do you have to pay extra for your health insurance if you work ringside?
I don't know. I'll ask my wife. I have no idea.
Like, there's more hazards to that job than most
right.
The nuances in that position is just insane. I mean, not only are you hearing the trash talk between opponents, but you're hearing the communication among teammates and the coaching staff. It's very, very cool that you were able to do that, Pierre. But I have one question that's just popped in my mind. It's out of left field, so Bear with me, everybody. Arizona goes to Utah, and I feel like Quebec City, such an amazing city. I just desperately want them to have a hockey team for a lot of reasons, but considering your history in media and just understanding where maybe where the NHL knows where to market, they probably have the reasons I don't know. And maybe it comes down to the city just not being able to bid enough. I don't know. But how do you feel about Quebec not having a hockey team for as long as they have? And do you think they should one day have it again? Or is it just not, is it a pipe dream for people? Sorry for any Quebec listeners.
No,
I think we have a couple probably.
Brian, I'm glad you asked the question. When they moved that team, I was heartbroken. I knew a lot of the major principals in Quebec City at the time. Marcel Aubu, who was one of the owners, Pierre Lacroix, who was a general manager, knew those guys really, really well. Pierre Page, Mark Crawford. I knew a lot of the people there. I coached a lot of games there. I thought it was a great hockey city, phenomenal. The Colisée was an awesome building. I can tell you that I would be surprised if NHL hockey ever went back there. I just don't know if the city's big enough. They definitely do not have the corporate dollars. And I think the NHL has, I think bigger targets in the United States, whether it be Houston, Texas, whether it be maybe Portland, Oregon, maybe to be going back to Arizona with a new building in a better location. So I think maybe Kansas City. I think it'd be really hard for a team to go back to Quebec. If money didn't matter, I guarantee you there'd be a team in Quebec, but I think money matters a lot. Winnipeg's having a tough time, Brian. Winnipeg's having a real tough time right now, staying viable financially. And so you look at that, and then you look at Quebec City, I think it'd be really hard, really hard.
Yeah, it's just you walk through the city, and I was in Quebec City maybe like 6 years ago, and I'm sure it's the same right now. But you have gift shops in the middle of downtown with just all the other NHL teams' jerseys. Like what other city in the world you just have other NHL teams' jerseys when you don't have a? It's they need a team. I know it's a business and it's a money thing, but it's unfortunate, I guess, is how I feel about it.
Well, their building is phenomenal right now.
Yeah.
Colisee's not there anymore. Now they have the Videotron Center. It's a beautiful building. It really is magnificent. I'll give you a good Scotty Bowman story that involves Quebec. So we played in Washington, D.C., Pittsburgh Penguins back in 1991-92. We didn't play very well. And the next day we flew out of Baltimore to Montreal. And then Scotty got off the bus by his parents' house in Verdun. And the bus kept going to Quebec. We were playing there on a Sunday night, so Saturday was our travel day. And he said, Petey, you're in charge of the team. So I said, okay, I got it. We'll practice when we get there. So we go to the Colisée, we practice, and then we get to the hotel, and all the guys are in the lobby in Quebec City, and they're really angry. So I go to one of our star players, and we had a bunch of stars at the time, and I said, what's the problem? What's going on? Somebody changed all the roommates. And there were no cell phones back then. And all of a sudden, I see the lady that's working at the front desk. She says, is there a Mr. McGuire here? And I'm, yeah, that's me. She goes, there's a phone call for you. So I said, really? So I go behind. I thought it was a prank. So I said, hello, Pierre. I said, yeah, Scotty. I said, hey, Scotty, what's up? He goes, how the guys acting? I said, they're really angry. He goes, yeah, by design. I wasn't happy with the way they played last night, so I changed all the roommates. And he goes, some of the guys are really mad because back then you could give guys roommates. They all didn't have single rooms. He says, I gave some of the guys that had singles, I gave them roommates. And I gave some of the guys that had roommates singles. So he goes, I want them ticked off because maybe they'll show up and play tomorrow. So, you'd have to look it up. But I think we won 9-1 or 9-2. We just destroyed them.
There you go.
Maybe I should do this all the time. I said, I don't think that's such a good idea.
Hey,
once in a while.
News that there's some a tactic for Jim Montgomery next playoffs, right?
No, he just changes the lines, not the roommates.
Well, he got him in a hotel before Game 7 against Toronto. Tried that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, he did. Mm-hmm.
That's an old Mike Milbury. Mike tried to do that with us in 1992 with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Put the guys in a hotel room in Boston. Didn't work. We swept in 4.
Yep.
I think I actually remember him because he was doing weekly appearances on the Greg Hill show during hockey season on WEI, and I think he brought that up that he had tried that.
He did try it. You know what? And I full marks to him, but he didn't put him in like the Ritz-Carlton or one of the nice hotels. I think he put him in a hotel in Malden, and it was more of an, not really a high-end hotel. So I think he was trying to get the guys to get more of a lunch pail mentality. I'm not sure that worked really well at that point.
Yeah, the old Motel 6 in Malden. That's not going to do it. Well, Pierre, thank you so much for your time. Bridget Scott, did you have any final questions for him?
Well, I have this marked on my calendar this upcoming year. If you have the time, Pierre, I'm really excited about Four Nations. I love watching, the national teams go against each other. A few of the games are in Montreal, then they come back to Boston. So are you looking forward to that? Is that something exciting to you? Because we haven't had a chance to watch the NHL guys in the Olympics in a long time. And now we get a chance to, the year before the Olympics, look at some of the national teams where they stand.
I love it, Bridget. Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited about it. I feel bad. Obviously, no Slovak representation, no Czech representation, and no Russian participation, and no German participation. So the 4 teams you have, obviously, Finland, Sweden, Canada, US, going to be elite, going to be phenomenal. Best on best is always fantastic. I always say this, and I don't want to bring politics into this at all, so excuse me. If you think this is a political statement, it's not. Russian players are not fighting in a war. They're hockey players. And whether you like it or not, it's never really an elite tournament at the world level unless the Russian players are there. It's not. But I understand how things work, and I totally understand the situations worldwide geopolitically, but I'm excited to watch the event. I'm really excited to watch the event. Yeah.
I'm trying to get Scott to come with me up there. Trying to get
Come on.
I think we can make it happen.
Yeah,
you can.
All right, yes. Remember that.
You hope that by the 26th Winter Olympics, there's some sort of resolution with Russia, even if it's, I think it was the last Olympics, obviously without NHLers, but they were able to at least compete with, whatever they call it, the unified team. The unified team. Yeah. Like at least something like that to have them out there, because you're right. Like that's a team you want to see. And, like you could still have Ovechkin in the picture at that time, his last go. Like I think you need that.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing that's going to be fun if you're a Canadian fan is watching Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, and Nathan McKinnon. That's going to be freaking unbelievable. It really is. And, I don't know how much you guys have talked about it, but Sidney and Nathan are amazingly tight. They train together all the time. Here's a good story for you. The day after Nathan was drafted first overall by Colorado, Sidney had him in California, and they were running sand dunes, and they were competing to see who was stronger, faster, and fitter. That's a day after the draft. Most guys are nursing a hangover. Nathan wasn't. Nathan was after it, and Sidney was all over him. So I have so much respect for those two guys. And obviously, I can tell you guys this story. Earlier this week, actually it was last week, late last week, I was with one of my former players where I live up here, Mario Lemieux. And we were just talking about old times and talking about different players. And he said to me, Pierre, in all my life, and I've played against a lot of really good players, he said, I've never seen a guy as fast and as skillful and as aware as Connor McDavid. That's coming from arguably one of the top 3 players in the history of the game. And that's what he told me. And you know what? I believe him. I don't think I've ever seen a guy go so fast and make plays at that speed quotient ever. He's an unbelievable talent. So imagine having McKinnon, McDavid, and Crosby on the same team. Good luck.
Yeah, no, it's going to be fun for Canadians, that's for sure. But I don't know about it.
Oh, by the way, Cale Makar on defense behind them.
Yeah, no. But the biggest problem for Canada is going to be who's going to be their goalie. And I will say this: the Americans aren't going to be short on firepower either. Americans are going to be real good. They're going to be really stout on defense. McAvoy's going to be a big part of that. They're going to be unbelievable up front. Austin Matthews, how many goals is he going to get this year? Is he going to get past 70 this year? He could. He really could. They're going to be, U.S. is going to be real good too. I think for Finland and Sweden, the problem's going to be consistent offense for both teams, but they'll be able to defend and goal for sure. But I would say Canada and the U.S. is going to be unbelievable to watch. It's going to be fantastic hockey for sure.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Pierre, my very first favorite player was Sidney Crosby. So do you have any good Sidney Crosby stories?
I got a lot of good ones. He's as much as you see a professional on the ice, that's how he carries himself every single day. He's an amazing professional person. One night I was asked by an owner of the Penguins at the time if I could host some of the Penguins players because it was their first time in Montreal, and I was living in Montreal with our family for dinner because it was Sid's first time coming into Montreal. So I said, yeah, sure, we can have him over for dinner. No problem. I'm not working the game, so I don't think there's any problem that way. So they came over for dinner, and one of the Penguin players, there were like 8 or 9 of them. Recchi was with the group. Recchi was still in Pittsburgh at the time, Mark. And one of the players was giving Sid a hard time. He had just built a house in the Maritimes, and it was, a pinkish color. And one of the players kept saying, hey, Sid, you built a pink house. Hey, Sid, you built a pink house. And Sidney goes after a while. Boom, he punches the table. It's not pink, it's salmon, and it's a beautiful color. And that kind of got everybody's attention because Sid was kind of a good sport until he punched the table. And
did he break your dinner table?
No, it was pretty funny, though. Everybody was kind of like, we got his attention.
They pushed his buttons too hard about
the house.
Yeah. That's a good one. I don't know if you got to go, Pierre. We don't want to keep you too long. We already kept you for 50 minutes. So we're just really happy to have you on. It's been a great conversation. You have, I'm sure, a million more stories that we can talk about, but we don't want to keep you forever.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Scott and Brian, and obviously Bridget. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to seeing you all around Boston this winter. Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much, Pierre.
So
you
much,
as well.
Pierre.
Take care, you guys.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks.